The U.S. Supreme Court has issued its final opinions from the current term. Today's decisions include a highly anticipated ruling on a voting rights case out of Arizona. Justices upheld two provisions of the state's law limiting how absentee ballots can be returned by voters.
Hello and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is the beginning of July. We're recording this on the night of July 1st. You may see it tonight late and when we post it, or you may see it tomorrow on July the 2nd. We're barreling towards the 4th of July, and we'll talk about that later. I don't particularly do much on the 4th of July, but we'll discuss. But right now, there's a guy named Val Atkinson. He's here back again with us this week. Hey, Val.
Hello.
Val, there's not a week that's gone by that we've done this program. We've passed the year mark really quick. We started doing this in March of last year, and now we're 15 months into the deal, and there has never been a time where we didn't have a lot to discuss, and today is no exception. In the Supreme Court, they ended their latest session, and there's been a lot of rulings this session. And Val, this is much more sobering, but we knew with the 6-3 court there wasn't going to be a whole lot in our favor. And today, in a ruling, Arizona Republican Party et al. Versus Democratic National Committee. We got some more bad news today. It was related to a case. If you notice when coming into the show, folks, we played a clip of a reporter spelling out the decision. Val, I knew that, a 6-3 court was not going to be good to us, and having voting rights case show up in front of this Roberts court, because he's already proven what he believes about voting rights with the Shelby case. Talk to me about your first impressions of the majority opinion in the case from Samuel Alito, and what does it portend for voting rights and the Voting Rights Act?
This could be characterized, Ed, as the final nail in the coffin, as far as I'm concerned. The Shelby case, Shelby v. Holder, really rocked the Voting Rights Act by getting rid of preclearance. That was the protection that we had to make sure that wayward legislatures didn't enact some draconian measures to keep people from voting until the courts could take a look at it. Preclearance meant that you had to get it pre-cleared before you could really act on it. Shelby v. Holder made it so that you could act on it, and the guys who didn't like it could take you to court. But in the meantime, things would stand as they are until it could be reversed. It's horrible. So the other side started working under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which allowed people to still make sure you're behaving properly. This ruling the majority decision written by Alito, Justice Alito, basically goes as far as it needs to go. The one that struck me, Ed, was the deal about handling ballots. A lot of people call it the anti-Stacey Abrams bill. I call it the anti-Harris bill, because we had some things here in North Carolina where people were harvesting ballots and lost an election behind it. But at any rate, they're making it so that if you're not a relative, a caregiver, or someone of that nature, you can't even assist a voter in taking their ballots and dropping them off and having it count. And the other killer was out of precinct voting. Now, how many times have we heard about precincts being moved at the last moment? How many times have we heard stories about people showing up at a precinct that they hadn't checked out in a year and a half. And the last time they checked, I voted at this elementary school. Well, that's been changed over a year ago, son. And well, where's the other one? I got 10 minutes to get across town to vote where I'm supposed to be. Can I do a provisional ballot? That's where Alito is going to hurt a lot of people. When he said, no, you don't have to count provisional ballots that are cast out of precinct. You don't have to count them. So that means if you're in the wrong place and you cast your ballot in the wrong place, they can just take it and throw it into what we used to call file 13, trash can.
Yeah.
That's going to really hurt a lot of us. Those were the main two that are the killers. And they're getting close to a point, Ed, where the numbers that we can produce by encouraging people, getting them mad and having them to hate the other side and all of this, the numbers that we can produce may not carry the same weight that it used to.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
Val, I'm one of those crazy people that actually read these opinions and stuff and listen to the oral arguments and all that kind of thing. And I knew after listening to the oral arguments, there wasn't much hope in this case. I do want to remind people that if you don't go back and read the opinions issued by the court in full, they're actually not that hard to read. You won't understand some of the legal jargon or whatever, but get a dictionary, look it up. So Val, back to Alito's opinion, he starts off by saying that this is about Section 2. The first word in it is Section 2. And so clearly they're targeting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The other thing that he tries to say right up front is that this is a question about whether or not states can make voting practices and whether or not those voting practices grant equal opportunity for everybody. And then the second part of the one that you talked about, the ballot harvesting or whatever, he used the term harvesting, but he even admitted that it was because it was ginned up, that it really doesn't exist, but it's because of people's fears. So even though they put the law in without a good rationale, it's still okay because he claims it doesn't hurt Black people. But he doesn't know that. So I want to go to Justice Kagan's dissent. And she was very direct and told everybody clearly that this is about race, that they know it's about race, and that they're not even pretending that it's not about race and it's not racist or driven by it. So if somebody has a racist motive, they can always just say that it is fair to everybody because the rule applies to everybody. And the one example she gave, Val, was that what if you changed the time to vote and you made that time all the times when the most Black people in your community worked and therefore couldn't get off work to go vote, and you shrunk the voting time to that? She said, well, Alito was arguing that that's okay, and it's not okay. Section 2 says that's not okay. Is there any hope? Because we've heard less and less talk about expanding the court. There was a lot of talk about that initially when Joe Biden won. Is there any hope of expanding the court and then having other cases come before the court where some of this might be corrected? Or, like you said, are we in the death spiral here? And because 6-3 is hard to overcome.
There's nothing that can be done, Ed, with a 6-3 majority and on the conservative side in the Supreme Court right now, especially when you have a 50-50 Senate with two people not caucusing with the people they pledged to caucus with. You can't get a lot done. This is the 117th Congress. The 118th Congress takes seat on January the 3rd of 2023. That's after the 2022 election. And if we are successful at winning some senatorial seats and holding on to the House seats, the House lead that we have, then we can come back to that question and say, what can we do? What about the whole business of doing everything in reconciliation? What about adding seats to the court, especially the high court? What about? We can do all of those things. But right now, as things stand with the 50-50 Senate, 2 senators not really caucusing with the people they pledged with, a 6-3 majority on the conservative side, you know, if you be honest with yourself, there ain't a thing that can be done that Republicans don't want to be done between now and the end of the 117th Congress. Now that's telling it like it is. Now we can get mad about it and we can talk about it in terms that it ain't fair and it doesn't make sense and it's illogical and he contradicted himself and you know, we can do all of that. But if you're talking about problem resolution and getting things done, you got to be serious and talk about it in that round. What can be done?
Yeah.
And I'm saying unless Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin have a go to meeting with Jesus kind of epiphany or whatever, ain't nothing gonna get done in the 117th Congress.
Yeah.
That's just the short and long of it.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, I want to remind the folks you're watching The Deal. This is Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson over there, and we're talking about the case Arizona Republican Committee versus the Democratic National Committee case that went the way I think we all expected it to, with a 6-3. Of course, our favorite Justice Clarence Thomas signed on with the other side. He joined in another opinion, you know, in addition to the main opinion that was written by Alito. You know, Val, one of the other things that's still problematic in the United States is the Republicans' willingness to not tell the truth about anything right now. And one of those things they're not telling the truth about is January 6th. They're still unwilling to do that. I have a clip real quick. Let's play it and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Okay.
And for his leadership in bringing this important legislation to the floor. I thank our distinguished majority leader for his clarity in presenting the case for this legislation, and all of our colleagues who have come to the floor on the Democratic side in the search of truth, justice, security for our country. I particularly thank Mr. McGovern because on the night of this insurrection, I was in the chair. The security came and pulled me out. He took the chair. He risked his life to take the chair as the assaulters of our Capitol were out to get me for the bullet in the head or to hang the Vice President of the United States, assault the lives of members of Congress, traumatize our staff, disrespect the workers in the Capitol. Not an ordinary tourist day in the Capitol.
It's clear to all of the people on this committee that our oath to the Constitution, our duty, our dedication to the rule of law, and the peaceful transfer of power has to come above any concern about partisanship or about politics. And I think that's crucially important. I'm honored to be on this committee. We have an obligation to have a thorough, sober investigation.
So, Val, that was Speaker Nancy Pelosi getting up to try to convince people to vote for a select committee. And of course, there was enough votes for it. 2 Republicans joined. And in the last part of that clip, you saw one Lynn Cheney, who is not anybody that I respect very much because I feel she's too hawkish like her father, and has not been a friend of Democrats over the years. And if you look at her voting record, she voted with Donald Trump more than a lot of people. However, there is now a select committee to deal with 1-6. Um, will this select committee be able to do anything uh, without Kevin McCarthy being willing to cooperate?
I hope it will, Ed, but I have reservations. And I'll tell you what those reservations are. It's already been discussed on some news channels today that the plan just well may be that McCarthy will tell his people not to cooperate with this select committee, not to testify, even try to deny a subpoena. Now, the way they're going to do that, they know they don't have the president to get people out of testifying before Congress like they did before. They're going to depend upon the courts this time. So when the select committee asks people like Kevin McCarthy or anybody else that the Republicans don't want to testify, they're going to hurry up and run this thing up to the Supreme Court with their 6-3 type advantage, and maybe make it so that these guys won't have to testify. Not right now anyway, okay? That's what their hope, that's their defense, because they don't have the presidency anymore. But they're hoping that they'll use the fact that there is not a real, true bipartisan committee, and that it's made up primarily of, by, and for Democrats, and that the subpoena power ought not to be there because this is a farce. That's their plan. Whether or not there will be a couple of justices that disagree with that, a couple of right-wing leaning justices that will side up with the 3 left-leaning justices, we don't know. But that's what it's going to take in order for that committee being headed up by the representative from Mississippi.
Benny Thompson.
Benny Thompson.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to take for him to be successful.
Well, Val, in the time we got left before we need to take a break, we might as well just clear out some other Supreme Court news, because you're right. This will probably end up in front of those same 6-3, court configuration. This court is interesting in that one justice on there, who I've mentioned already, Clarence Thomas, made a public statement about marijuana this week. We didn't talk about this before the show, but he was like, the marijuana rules don't make any sense. And he said it publicly, which I thought was really strange, because Clarence Thomas doesn't talk. We just found out he could talk in the last couple of years. So that's one. But I'm cynical about it, Val, because I have seen people like John Boehner, the former speaker, who is a Republican, and other Republicans get into the marijuana business. I'm so cynical to believe that Clarence Thomas said it because there's all these Republicans that are now marijuana millionaires, and he's okay with it now. I don't think you would have gotten a statement from Clarence Thomas in the past that the marijuana sentencing laws are out of whack. I mean, am I overreading that?
By no means, Ed. And that's what it is. Clarence Thomas is letting his wares be flaunted in the public eye. He doesn't care if you know where he's coming from, that he's always going to come down on the side of the most right-leaning Republican that he can find. He doesn't care if you know where he is, what side of his bread is buttered on. He doesn't care about those kinds of things. He's who he is. He's unabashed. He'll be that way until he dies. And he hopes that he's not buried in a Democratic cemetery.
That was a good one. You know what? That means it's time for us to take a break. I hear the music in the background. So let's take a break. When we come back, I want to switch gears and talk about the Teflon Don, Donald Trump. And there are indictments finally. We've been waiting for months. And Val's going to tell me what it means when we come back. Stay right there. You're watching The Deal.
Type 2 diabetes can have a big impact on your life. But how can it be prevented? Well, the first step is knowing if you have something called prediabetes. Take the 1-minute risk test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
And welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. I'm still giggling from the end of the last segment. Our buddy Clarence Thomas, Lord have mercy. Lord help us, Jesus. The last thing about the Supreme Court, we're going to move on and talk about Donald Trump. There has been some talk about Justice Breyer maybe leaving the court. That opens up a seat for, Joe Biden. I think we've already thrown out filibuster rules when it comes to Supreme Court judges.
Yes.
So it would probably be 50-50. Vice President Harris goes in, 51 votes. We get a Supreme Court justice. I think I asked you a little bit about this before we left. There's no more talk about expanding the court. Is that just off the table altogether? And then all you could hope to do is replace somebody who may retire or die. Is that where we are?
I think that's where we are right now. I don't think we can expand the court under reconciliation. I think you don't have the votes to change the filibuster rule, the cloture rule, Senate Rule 22. So if Senate Rule 22 is still intact, cloture rules are still intact, you got a filibuster, meaning any US senator can stop everything in its tracks. Then you can never get to the 50-50 and hand things over to the vice president.
Yeah.
So, there won't be a chance, any opportunity at all, to increase the size of the court until we can get to the next Congress, hopefully with the numbers in our favor, that we can take on this tough subject. And to me, it's the first thing that should be undertaken, Ed, is the enhancement of the courts, some call it, adding another 9 seats or 7 or 6 or whatever number you need to add to come up with an uneven number. Now, whether or not you start talking about term limits, I don't know how many things you want to put in that pot right away, but just adding 6 more would do it.
Yeah.
Would make it a court of 15 with a majority of sane people without these crazy.
And that's what we need, sane people on the court.
Right.
That's a good time to segue, because we don't have a sane court, but we also did not have a sane president, Val. Our past president, Donald Trump, it's been revealed this week that he was much sicker than anybody ever imagined. He almost died for real. His oxygen level had gotten into the 80s at one point, which is not good, and survivability is not good. But he was able to get an experimental drug, which he claimed everybody else would get, but nobody else got but him. Maybe Rudy Giuliani and those people that in the White House that got sick under him, which points out the Teflon nature of him. So I'm gonna play a clip real quick, and then we'll come back and talk about his latest problems.
Investigations say the company and Weisselberg are accused of avoiding taxes on fringe benefits, including cars, school tuition, and rent-free apartments. The charges come after the Manhattan district attorney obtained Trump's tax returns and other financial records in a battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Trump has long insisted he runs a clean company and that the investigation is politically motivated.
The continuation of the greatest and most disgusting witch hunt of all time.
So, Val, there you go. There's indictments of Alan Weisselberg, who is the money man for Donald Trump. He carries the money bag. He writes the checks. There's two names that appear on checks for the Trump organization. One is Weisselberg and one is Donald Trump. So either one of them can write checks. The problem here for Mr. Weisselberg is that he was getting benefits and not being taxed for it. They got a hold of Donald Trump's tax returns. Cy Vance did. And in it, it shows clearly that most years he paid zero. In a couple of years, he paid $750 in taxes. And he has a loan that's coming due of $300 million that he has no clear way of paying for. So there's a number of things wrapped up into that, Val. Let's start first back with Mr. Weisselberg. Tell me what his problem is, and will they be able to get him to flip? I've been seeing his daughter-in-law or ex-daughter-in-law on TV a lot the last couple of days. Talk to me about Mr. Weisselberg's problems.
Mr. Weisselberg has some considerable problem because he's been indicted not as a part of an organization, but personally himself with criminal indictment. And he could see jail time, real jail time, not to mention the monetary fines and those kinds of things. But I, for one, believe that Weisselberg is going to fall on his sword. I don't think he's going to flip. I think he has been sufficiently talked to by either Donald Trump or a Donald Trump representative and told him, don't worry about anything. Trump can't pardon you anymore, but we can get your case to the Supreme Court with all deliberate speed. And we got a 6-3 majority. And just as Bill Cosby was let go the other day, same thing can happen to you in a much shorter period of time. So I think that Alan Weisselberg really believes in that. I think the first thing he's going to try is to show his allegiance and support for his longtime boss, Donald Trump. And he's not going to flip. I hope I am absolutely wrong. Let me say that. I hope I'm absolutely wrong, but I got to tell you what I really feel in my heart. I don't think he's going to flip.
So Alan Weisselberg has his own problems. And that's pretty clear. Donald Trump doesn't have any directly right now, right? So the issue is for the Trump organization, and the AG of the state of New York came out almost, immediately after the indictments of Weisselberg and said the Trump organization is not in the clear. They have their own issues. It's clear they haven't been paying taxes. It's clear they've been overstating the worth of the company. It's clear that there may be insurance fraud, all kind of things that will affect Donald Trump's company, the Trump organization. There still hasn't been anything said directly about Donald Trump. So here's the $1 million question. Can you get to Donald Trump? Is there any way that we're ever going to see him have to give another deposition at the very minimal, or be actually indicted for something?
I think there is a possibility. And if justice means anything, there will be an indictment at some point down the line for all of the things he's done all of his life, but in particular over the last 5, 6, 7 years. But it's going to take more than I think what the prosecution has right now. They're trying to backdoor him now, trying to get to him by flipping Weisselberg. I don't think that's going to work. And we don't know what's going to come out of all of those millions of pages of tax returns that they have in their possessions, the district attorney and the attorney general. But there may be something that you'll be held accountable for. I believe in justice. And I think that it's just too big of a reach, too long of a hope to think that Donald Trump could live to be well in his 80s and 90s and continue to break the law and do all of the myriad crazy things that he's done and never be held account for it. I don't think that that's a possibility. I think one day he's going to get his comeuppance. I just have no idea when and for what.
Well, Val, even last night and this morning, and you saw in his statement about the indictment, saying that he's still saying that this is a witch hunt, and he says now that it's just the state of New York that's after him. Cyber ninjas are still counting votes in Arizona. There's other states that are thinking about doing these phony audits. We've seen all of these crazy supposed voter fraud, legislation go through. Donald Trump has left a tremendous destruction in his wake. You know what I'm saying? He's been able to totally disrupt all the sort of norms. However, what I think when I think about Donald Trump is he's not the problem. The problem is the people who voted for him. And we've talked about this a number of times, Val. Talk to me a little bit about how do you get to where 80-90% of the Republican Party still supports Donald Trump, even after all the stuff, the indictments today, paying Stormy Daniels, causing a insurrection, refusing to do anything about COVID, and almost dying himself. And people still line up to go see him in Texas last night, Ohio a few nights before, a few weeks ago in North Carolina. There were people lined up to see him. It can't be Donald Trump himself, can it? Or is it a larger issue of this clinging to some whiteness, because all these other people associated with him, like Representative Gosar from Arizona, who goes to white supremacist meetings in the open and don't feel any repercussions? That's a long-winded question, Val, but Donald Trump isn't the problem, is he?
No, he is not the problem. But what the problem is that we on the other side of it are going about it the wrong way. We spend too much time trying to convince Trump supporters, and they are the problem, that they are looking at this the wrong way. They're supporting the wrong guy. He is a douchebag. He's not worth supporting. This, that. We spend all of our time trying to get them to come back on this side of the track. And sometimes you need to go by that old adage that football coaches used to say, if you're having a hard time keeping the guy out of the backfield, that defensive tackle, that he's just too big of a brute and that kind of thing, instead of holding him back or trying to push him back, step out of the way. He'll fall flat on his face. Step out of the way. And I think that's what anti-Trumpers need to do. Stop trying to convince his followers that this is a bad guy. And I caught him in a lie yesterday. You can't count the number of lies you've caught him in, okay? We spend too much time doing that. And we need to spend our time doing some other things that is preparing for the weak side of things. For an example, I think Democrats and all anti-Trumpers need to be preparing for the 2022 congressional elections. That's the House and the Senate. Every wakening moment, every ounce of energy that we have should be poured into that. And every time you're talking about Trump or his followers, that's wasted energy and wasted time that you could be figuring out strategies how to get more votes to win more Senate seats and keep more House seats, because that's where the change is going to come from. I can map out a victory strategy from those victories there, House and Senate victories. You can't map out a victory strategy for me by trying to convince his supporters that he's a bad guy. You can't map it out. Mm-hmm. There's no victory strategy there. So we're wasting our time And we don't have a lot of time left to go trying to convince these guys that, hey, there's a bad guy. You know, to give you another analogy, you know, I love analogies. It's like the French resist after Hitler had conquered France and overrun Paris. And you had all your French resistor elements. It's like those guys trying to talk to the SS and the Waffen guys into how bad Hitler is and why are you doing this to the Jews? And come on, are you crazy?
Right. You weren't going to change any hearts and minds. Where, you know. Well, Val, you know what? I hear some music, so you know what that means. We need to take a break. So when we come back, I got a whole bunch of other stuff. We're going to just run through a bunch of things.
Right.
But I want to start with you about the 4th of July. I want you to tell me why you are so jacked up about the 4th of July and all your big 4th of July plans. Everybody stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
As an Olympic athlete, I prepare for everything. So when I became pregnant, I thought I was ready. But at 32 weeks, I was diagnosed with severe preeclampsia and had an emergency C-section. Looking back, had I known the warning signs, I would have talked to my doctor sooner. Too many women die of pregnancy-related complications, and most are preventable. If you or someone you know is pregnant or recently had a baby, learn the warning signs. It could help save her life. Hear her.
Originally, we were not even supposed to be on the podium during the singing or the playing of the national anthem. When we were back in the call room, the directions were that we were going to be introduced to the crowd before the anthem was going to be played or after the anthem was going to be played. No one made any mention or any notion that we would be on the podium or had to be on the podium during the singing of the national anthem. I want to make that clear.
And welcome back to the final segment of the deal. If you're watching this, it's probably July 2nd, 2021. And you saw a clip on the way back in of Gwen Berry. She is a very good athlete. She is a hammer thrower. You don't think about the hammer throw very much, but Val, in my old life, when I was a sports agent, and I actually had a couple of hammer throwers that were world-class hammer throwers that I used to represent. And so I know that sport pretty well. And at a very high level in track and field, if you're a hammer thrower, you're an excellent athlete. And this one athlete, Gwen Berry, nowhere during the Olympic trials, Val, did they play the national anthem with the athletes standing on the podium, because we're all in America and there's no other competition other than Americans. And for some reason, when Berry got up on the podium to receive her medal, the national anthem came on. And of course, the reaction to most people is to turn to face the flag or whatever. But everybody knows that Miss Berry has had a problem with that. She protested at the Pan Am Games, got herself in a little bit of trouble there. She raised her fist during the national anthem at the Pan Am Games where she won the gold medal. And she's been unapologetic about, not wanting to participate in that. And so the only time that the anthem was played was when she was on the podium, which seems to me to be kind of suspicious, but neither here nor there. The first thing I want to talk about, Val, just real quick, why in America have we tied the national anthem to sports in the first place? What does that prove, especially when everybody at this particular event is already American and they played the national anthem at the beginning of the competition, on the first day? So what is this thing with the sports and national anthem?
Well, we've always had, for a long time, national anthems played before certain sports events and those kinds of things. But it got its uplift right after the Vietnam War, because of the way soldiers were treated coming back from Vietnam, the protests in the street against the Vietnam War. People didn't seem that they recognized or really revered the Union Jack, as it were, as they used to. So When the Iraq War started, one of the things that the military strategists wanted to make sure this was not going to be another Vietnam. And all of the things that caused problems, not in the field, but at home, with the anti-war movement, with the anti-patriotism things going on. They wanted to stop that right away. And that's why you had the whole business of the celebratory type of events surrounding 9/11, where first responders, police, firemen, soldiers, anything having to do with the flag was sacrosanct. And that's where it all starts. Now, it's like it has taken on a life of itself. You are not an American if you don't do all that is necessary to show everybody else that you love the country by supporting the flag. They've taken it overboard.
Well, you mean to tell me they weren't playing the national anthem when people were playing cricket back in the 1830s in the United States, or they weren't playing it before rugby games, before football became a sport in the United States? Is that what you're telling me, Val? That we weren't playing it at Pee Wee Tiddlywinks games back in the 1870s, or marble games back in the and I'm being facetious here because I have been in knockdown, drag out arguments with people that this has always been done. And the national anthem didn't become the national anthem until the 20th century. It was not officially the national anthem until then. And then Miss Berry, in her, some of her interviews I've seen with her, she says, the other problem we should have with it is the third stanza is about keeping Black people as slaves.
Amen. That's exactly right.
But it goes back to something that we've talked about in recent weeks, Val, is the desire of some people not to deal with history. And a lot of the deal and connections, the show we do on Sunday, we spend a lot of time talking about history. And this other history I want to talk about real quick as we shift gears from that, but it's related, is the 4th of July. And I made a joke about, celebrating the 4th of July, whatever. I can't tell you the last time I actually on purpose did something for the 4th of July. Because I reevaluated it, Val, and I said, look, we just had Juneteenth for the first time as a federal holiday that, just sort of dropped in on us. But I had been to Juneteenth celebrations for a long time when it wasn't a federal holiday. But let's talk about history in the 4th of July. What are we actually celebrating when we celebrate the 4th of July? Well, what was signed on the 4th of July was the Declaration of Independence, which is completely different than the Constitution, which I think actually started the country, right? Because without the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation were not working out. So talk to me some history a little bit. What happened on July 4th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that we're supposedly celebrating, and what supposedly makes this a country? What happened in Pennsylvania?
Well, what people are supposed to be celebrating is this great country of ours called the United States of America, that we celebrate our freedom from the British, and we are a standalone country, and we are the best of the best. But it has morphed into something that's unrecognizable now. And that's not what people celebrate. When people celebrate the 4th of July now, too often, it's intra-country politics, celebrating conservatism over liberalism, celebrating South over North or whatever, now that the Confederate flag has lost some of its glory, some of its status now. But at some point, people must realize that celebrating the 4th of July with the flag and all the pageantry and so forth is a choice. I remember when I was living in DC, I used to go to some of the events by the Drum and Fife Corps on the mall in DC, watch the fireworks and so forth and come on. But there weren't a lot of people in DC that had flags out on their balconies or on their porches and that kind of thing. They didn't need to do that. They celebrated by firing their firearms up in the air, and they weren't worried about getting caught or somebody turning them in. So things have changed quite a bit over time. I think we're going to see a different change coming in now, Ed, with Juneteenth, as you mentioned. And I'm anxious to see how Juneteenth and the 4th of July are going to be celebrated in 2022, because they are really close together. They're less than a month apart. And, if you celebrate one, why can't you celebrate both? And we'll see how that works out. I think if you want to go into a new business, Ed, go into making Juneteenth paraphernalia. It's not a lot of room left now. Yeah. People are already doing that. The flags, the shirts, the memorabilia, because that's going to be a good market for that out there now. But this whole thing about the 4th of July is really something that people need to take a close look at. A fraternity brother of mine and an excellent athlete by the name of Colin Kaepernick tried to make it palatable to all people by saying, I'm taking a knee, not against the flag, not against the United States of America, not against the anthem, but against racism and police brutality. And of course, they changed that all around, and now he's against the flag or whatever. But we need to have this opportunity to take a look at what the old Union Jack means. Who is it for? What is it for? And move on from there.
Yeah, and the same thing happening now with Gwen Berry. I hopefully at some point maybe I can talk to her. I've reached out to her to see if we can get her on, because she's really sticking her neck out on this, and people like Colin Kaepernick have stuck their neck out and had to pay the price for it. Val, we're going to switch gears a whole bunch here. Your favorite comedian, Bill Cosby, is back in the limelight. I'm gonna play a clip real quick. This is Bill Cosby.
And nobody had the sense to say, wait 1 second, this doesn't match up with the truth. This is not what I was taught in college. This is not what I was taught at home, et cetera, et cetera.
So, Val, I know you want some Jell-O pudding now. But Bill Cosby is out of jail. Bill Cosby is out of jail. And he's out of jail because the attorney that was Donald Trump's attorney during the impeachment was the prosecutor in Pennsylvania, and he double-crossed Bill Cosby after agreeing not to prosecute him for stuff they learned in the civil case. He prosecuted him with that evidence, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw it out. So now Mr. Cosby is at home in suburban Philadelphia. What is the upshot of this, Val? Some people are happy, some people aren't.
I don't know if there is an upshot, really, because I think about the victims. The victims have still been hurt, and they tried to get closure. Some type of closure in this whole process by knowing that he had faced the criminal justice system, had been given a sentence, and was paying for his misdeeds. Now that's been overturned on a technicality, and they must feel awful for what they had to endure. But I'm looking at it from my perspective. And as a young man, we people in my circles, we used to idolize Bill Cosby. We used to all say, I'd like to be like this guy. He's got fame, he's got fortune, he's got good looks, he's educated, he's smart, he's got everything. And we thought if you have everything, being able to attract the opposite sex was the last problem that you would be concerned about. And for what he did, obviously he didn't have the self-confidence that he could prevail when it came to the Olympics of opposite sex attraction. It's mind-boggling to me that a guy with the stature of Bill Cosby had to revert to quaaludes in order to get a young lady in a position that she could not deny him sex. I mean, I can't forgive that.
Yeah.
I don't care about his ability to be humorous, his acting prowess, the fact that he earned a PhD. It wasn't a honorary doctorate degree, and I don't care about all of that. When he did what he did to have sex with women, I took him off my list.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a bridge too far for me. I mean, Val, I still like you are flummoxed every time I think about the fact that he didn't have to resort to that. I'm sure
Right.
there were plenty of people throwing themselves at him, unfortunately, because he was a celebrity. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about one last story. We talked about it a little bit last week. It has to do with the NCAA. They got a very bad news in the Supreme Court. It was a 9-0 decision saying that these extra benefits that you could get for academic reasons were okay. Now, as of today, though, Val, they've also agreed that students could earn money from their own likeness. And let's look at a clip. This is Paul Feinbein, and he's talking about what the result of that is.
Day in the history of the NCAA, and that is not an understatement, Fitz. Because of what is crumbling today, the model of the NCAA is coming down, and you can never put it back up again. The fact that the NCAA is really worthless after today is also a very significant moment.
So Val, I think he's a little bit overstated here. He says it's the end of the NCAA or whatever, blah, blah, blah. You they have made so much money off of free labor from black folks in the last 50 years, it ain't even funny. I think people are still going to watch the NCAA tournament in basketball. I think they're still going to watch football. They're going to watch the national championship for college. Because there still is no other place to play as a minor league in basketball and football where all the money is generated. This is just another revenue stream that, say, some kid may get an endorsement deal or whatever. What do you think the real change is going to be here, other than that there'll be more pots of money that will get split up as opposed to the full death of the NCAA?
I think what Paul Feinbaum was talking about is the hold that coaches and the NCAA had on student athletes. And the athletes are going to have a little bit control themselves. We already got a piece where athletes can leave one institution and go to another and resume his playing time without having to sit out a year. And that hurts. And we know about the one and done. Those kinds of things are hurting coaches' ability to run roughshod over these kids. A lot of coaches don't like it. Some say those are the kind of things that ran Roy Williams and Coach K out of the business, and may or may not have done that. But the point is, the players are going to finally get their due. These are the guys who are putting in the hard work. These are the guys who people go pay good money to see perform. So they should be paid. They should have been paid long time ago. But at this particular point, the NCAA is going to change, and Paul was halfway right, but he implied that it was going to change for the worse. I disagree with him. It's going to change for the better. Yeah. And it's going to be a good place for kids to go to school, learn, prepare their tools, to become better athletes and get ready for their life's work, which is playing professional sports. So, I mean, you wouldn't fault a mechanic for trying to, hone his skills so that he can be the best mechanic he can be, so he can get ready for his life work. Let the student athletes do the same thing.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm hoping that means that some kids are going to end up at North Carolina Central or Alabama A&M or A&T. Norfolk State, or or a lot of schools, because they have a choice, right? They can go where they're going to be most appreciated, and if their athletic skills gets them an endorsement. If I'm playing at Howard and Nike wants to still endorse with me as a spokesperson, I can play at Howard, which is what I hope to see happen, because I keep trying to remind people that, most of these schools did not have Negroes until the early 70s, and Negroes in any significant numbers until the early 80s. I think 83 was really 82, 83 when you could be on TV more than 3 times in a year. People forget that in college football, not until 1983 could you be on TV more than 3 times in a year. That was controlled by the NCAA. And they thought that was going to be the end of the NCAA because a school could be in their own network, the ACC network or SEC network. Anyway, we'll see what happens there. I don't think it's the end of the NCAA. I just think it'll be a different one. Val, in the time we got left here, as I always do, I need for you to tell me something I need to be looking forward to, or something you're working on, or what do we need to be paying attention to?
Well, I'm reading a book right now that I want to encourage folks to read, especially if you have any interest in the Civil War or Confederate monuments and statues that have come down, or the bases that have been named after the failed generals in the Confederacy and that sort of thing. It's entitled Robert E. Lee and Me, and it's written by a gentleman by the name of Ty Sigel, and he is a professor of history emeritus from West Point, and he taught the subject of history with his emphasis on why Robert E. Lee was really a traitor and should have been treated that way. And he talks about it from his standpoint of being raised as a Southerner, thinking that Robert E. Lee was a great guy, and then finding out through his research and all of his wares, preparing himself as a professor, that it was just the opposite. And Robert E. Lee should have never been given the glory that he has been given by this country. It's a great book.
That is a good book to read. I still need for people to buy Val's book, his latest one. Val, what's the name of your book that's out now?
Electoral College and the Black and Brown Vote.
Electoral College and the Black and Brown Vote. Please go find that somewhere. Val needs to eat, pay bills.
Yes, so, please.
Folks, we've covered a lot of ground today. As you noticed, the last 2 weeks we've been here before Saturday, which we may keep doing. It just so happens that this is the 4th of July holiday weekend. I know I don't necessarily do anything, but a lot of people do. So we're here a little bit early, just to take that into consideration. In the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody. Don't be selfish. We're going to be back here next week, and we'll be here to talk about all this stuff next Sunday. Go over to Foxy 107, 104 at 8 a.m. on Sunday for Connections with Val Atkinson. I'll be along for the ride on that. Check out the deal with edclark.com for my latest column. It is about the 4th of July, and it'll be out on the 4th of July. And all of that stuff. So we really appreciate you guys taking the time to come in. We'll see you next week. You've been watching The Deal. Thanks a lot. Bye.
We're cold. We're cold. We're cold. We're cold. We're cold.
happened leading up to January 6th.